And good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. Here it is in late August. Welcome. My name is Bryan Armentrout. I am with the Food Safety Foundation. And this, of course, is the LinkedIn Live conversation we have with Food Safety Chat. We do this every Friday at the same time. So 8 a.m. Mountain Time, where I'm located at, 10 a.m. Eastern. If you happen to be in, Colombia, it's 9 a.m. there. And every week we have this live stream and we go through and we talk about conversations and topics around food safety. And if you're new to this show, what you'll notice is this is not a presentation. This is an interactive experience where I bring in experts to talk with us about specific food safety issues. So in your chat, Bernardo and I can see the chat, and please put your questions and comments as you go along. So the more interaction we have here, the more interesting and fun it is. And so with that, I'd like to introduce my guest for this morning, Bernardo Clavijo. Good morning, sir.
Good morning to all.
And so you are calling and joining us today from Bogota, Colombia, correct?
Right, the capital, yes.
Very nice. How's your weather in Colombia today?
Well, it's sunny day, fortunately, but the temperature is so low. It's 12 degrees centigrade.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's colder than here. In Colorado, it is currently 16 degrees. So you're actually colder.
Yes.
What's the elevation? What is the height of Bogota?
2,600 meters from the sea.
Oh, wow. So very high. Yeah, people, I doubt a lot of people know that, right? And so that's very similar to Colorado, right? So Denver is at like the weird US system, right? So 5,280 feet is a mile, right? Silly, but so approximately the same. So very interesting. I think a lot of this, right, and this is part of the issue with being in the US, right, is we don't necessarily understand the rest of the world and geography and things like that. And then they know that Colombia is close to the equator and that it must be very, very hot. But Colombia is a very diverse country and very big country too. How many people live in Colombia?
More or less 40 million people.
Wow. Yeah. So yeah, big country for sure.
Yeah.
So everybody who's joining us, please.
Sorry,
a little bit of a lag, but we'll get through that. So I am in Loveland, Colorado, here in the USA, which is a little north of Denver, Colorado. So please, everyone, type in the comments and let us know where you're listening from. We always like to hear from you. And this is interactive again, so please let us know what you're thinking. As a little bonus here for Bernardo as well, in the lower right of the screen is the flag of Colombia there. So so everyone knows now what the flag for Colombia looks like. And when we were preparing, I asked him about the colors on the flag, and the gold color is for gold, right? So for real gold with the Spaniards and all of that type of history there. So that's interesting as well. So we try and teach many things here on the Food Safety Chat. Cheryl, good morning. Nice to see you. So I wanted to kind of give a little bit of background for Bernardo. Bernardo and I both work for EAS Consulting, which is part of the certified group, and that's his email on here that you see. Of course, you can reach out to Bernardo if you have questions after and talk with him about the different subjects. And with that, then we have this wide network of consultants, and that's how we met for this conversation. And as I was preparing and looking at Bernardo's CV, his background on LinkedIn, wow! So very, very impressive background. So he has a microbiology background like me, and so he's a consultant, of course, in the Colombian market, and he is a process authority. And if you don't know what a process authority is, we'll talk about that here in a little bit, and we'll explain more about what they do. Bryan Ravage, good morning, my friend. Nice to see you, and glad Renee is here as well, who works on my team. So he has expertise in quality assurance, food safety, the Food Safety Modernization Act, Global Food Safety Initiative standards, He used to be a teacher and a professor at a university in Colombia. And his main area of expertise then relative to these type of programs that we'll be talking about is process validation. Right. So this is going to be a interesting discussion, and I expect a lot of interaction here, because process validation is something I think, Bernardo, that people don't necessarily understand. Can you explain that for them, please?
Yeah, in fact, not only in US, but globally, I think it's a little confusion between monitoring, verification, and validation activities in the framework of food safety management systems. So people in the industry are normally perform activities of monitoring and verification, but validation activities have a complex frame of knowledge and experience, and the how microbes, for example, can are affected by temperature, time exposure, time of certain temperature, or disinfectants, or any condition that can inactivate them. So it's important to understand the response, the microbial response to environment condition, to know if the process condition control the microbes properly.
No, that's a good point. I have a follow-up question. Before I do, there's something, Bernardo, that I forgot, and I always do this, is I forgot to have our drink together. So if you have your beverage, please join me, and everyone on the call, join us for a drink of your favorite beverage as we start our conversation.
For example, a Colombian coffee.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Best coffee in the world. So with validation, right, that's every production facility is unique, right? They have different equipment, they have different facility design, they have different power, different steam capabilities, all of these type of things combined. And so in the US, with validation, I think, Bernardo, a lot of companies are unsure, because in the US, Food and Drug Administration will come in to do an inspection. And with the validation piece, FDA will say, okay, show us your documentation for this process. And they will pull up paperwork that says, oh, okay, this was at this temperature for this time. And they give that to FDA. And FDA says, okay, that's nice. How do you know that this is effective, right? And companies go, I don't know, right? And that's validation, right? You have to be able to say and have a process authority and an expert who can come in and say, okay, for your product on this equipment for this time and this temperature, this is sufficient, to your point, to inactivate microbes. Right? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and the thing for process authority work not only is related to microbial response to temperature and time, for example. But the technical issues about how heat is applied to the food. I mean, in an autoclave, the heat transfer depends on many factors: the heat medium, the circulating of steam, for example, the distribution of the heat, the size of the packaging, the rheological, I don't know if the word is correct, the rheology of the food.
Yeah, so like the thickness and the viscosity and
exactly.
Well, and also, right, particles, right? So for example, if you are autoclaving a package of soup, right, with peas and carrots and meat and all these other things in that, that makes it much more complex to make sure that that's effective.
Yeah. For that reason, the thermal authority has to know something of thermodynamics in terms of heat transfer of food. And another example with different implications are UST treatments, for example, or pasteurization treatments. That even though you can control and measure very precisely the temperature, the time that is needed for holding the temperature of food is not measured directly, but you can measure through the flow rate of the product through the holding tube, for example.
Yeah, that's right.
You have to know something about fluid dynamics, for example.
Yes, I often hear the terms laminar flow and turbulent flow. Can you explain those?
Well, you can the way of you heat water, for example, in a tube is different. For example, from milk or other viscosity fluids, because the major or the more viscosity the food has, the less time to pass through the certain piece of holding tube. So you have to know the viscosity properties, I don't.
So like
it's difficult to find the correct English words, but the density is the other physicochemical property that you have to know to determine the Reynolds number and this kind of dynamics property of the fluid through the tube.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when you have, and so part of this that we haven't discussed yet is the different types of microbial inactivation. So we talked about autoclave, right, where you're doing in batches, but you can also do continuous processes. So as Bernardo's talking about, you have pasteurization equipment, right, where the product is coming in and going out in one continuous flow. So there are different methodologies that are out there. People are using pressure, for example, for sterilization of different products. And in the United States, you'll see this with products like guacamole, for example, where they have packets of prepared guacamole and they use pressure to kill the bacteria. So with the laminar, and let me know if I get this right or if I'm incorrect. So with the two types of flow, so you have a liquid going through a tube in our example, and laminar flow means that it's going through that very quickly. And you have product that's around the outside of the tube that is moving at a different speed than the product in the middle of the tube. And that has a lot to do with the viscosity of the product. So if you're trying to transfer heat to that liquid, the product on the outside of the tube is going to get more heat than the center of the tube. So those calculations have to be put into place. Then you have turbulent flow. So the system is designed so that the liquid in the tube can't do that, and it mixes much more. And so that's an important factor for liquids going through a system for microbial inactivation to understand. And those are the type of things that a process authority such as yourself need to understand in order to set the correct validation parameters for that product. Yes?
That's it. Yeah, it's correct.
And yeah, so so a process authority is in the US is a very specialized position. There's not many around, but they are essentially experts, right, in those fields. And I'm curious to know if it's the same in Colombia. So in the United States, so for example, when I worked at White Wave Foods, we had products that were aseptic and products that were ultra high temperature, these type of things. And we had process authorities who would come in and then set up all of these parameters and then test it to make sure it works. We'll talk about that, I think, too. And then they would kind of give us like a piece of paper, right? And say, here is your standards. And as the process authority, the expert, I put my stamp on that, and so you validate that process, right? And then you cannot deviate from that, right? So if you have a variation in your equipment, you then have to file for a variance. So let's say, for example, my equipment, the temperature isn't quite right, and it goes down a little bit. I would have to contact you as my process authority and say, hey, Bernardo, my equipment malfunctioned. I need a variance. Can you look at my data to see if this product is okay? Is that a good summary?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
As you said, Bryan, the process authority role does not end with the report of validation of some thermal process, because this kind of deviation has a technical implication to inactivation of microbes that you have to control. The process authority has the expertise to determine if the deviation can allow a reprocess of the process or have to reject the lot. So it's important to know the opinion of thermal process with the data to take the proper decision of a lot.
Right. And so companies that are smart will set their operating parameters higher than the actual limits that the process authority sets. So if there is a flow rate of, we'll say like, we'll use US numbers. Let's say we have a flow rate of 200 gallons per minute and a minimum temperature at processing of 200 degrees Fahrenheit. You would then run well above that. You would run at 220 degrees Fahrenheit at the same speed to make sure that if something malfunctioned along this line, that you still were safe. But the process authority would still need to make sure that that's okay.
Yeah, and he will determine the relation, the different equivalence of relation of temperature and time. In general, is a log linear relationship between these two variables, but in real life, it's necessary to make some calculation precisely to determine if the deviation have to correct with a certain proper reprocess of the product. So and the future adjustment in the process has to be calculated properly by the thermal authority.
Right. Yep. No, that makes sense. Let's see. Cheryl had a question, Bernardo. Let's see here. What do you do if there is no kill step in the process, such that it is a co-pack, so meaning someone else is making it for you, and the kill step was at the blender or further down the line at that customer? So I'm Cheryl, maybe you can give us more information. I'm confused. So there's your first sentence says no kill step, and then there was a kill step farther down the system, right? So there's two different answers to that. I will try, Cheryl and Bernardo, please help me to answer the question. If I get it wrong, please type more comments and I'll see if I can get it right. So for the first part, if you have a process with no kill step, so let's say, for example, that you are manufacturing a granola bar, an energy bar product, where there's no kill step. You're going to be relying upon your systems, your prerequisite and your preventive controls. So your sanitation, your cleaning processes, and most importantly, your supplier control. So everything that goes in that product needs to be of the highest quality from a food safety standpoint in order to make a good product. So if you are putting in oats, you need to make sure that your supplier is producing oats that are going to be safe. Because to your point, Cheryl, there's nothing in the process. There's no kill step to protect you. So you're very reliant on your programs and especially your supplier control to make sure that that is okay. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well with suppliers. So for the second part, the kill step was at the blender or further down the line at the customer. Oh, I see what they're saying. So here's an example, Bernardo, maybe we can work with. So let's say that you're a dairy processor and you are producing skim milk, and you are then taking the cream and selling it to someone else. If you are doing that, that cream is collected pre-pasteurization. So there's no processing, no heat processing at that point. So under the regulations in the United States, and it may be different in Colombia, I'll be curious to hear, is that under the Food Safety Modernization Act, you need to let the customer who purchases the cream know that that has not been treated for a microbial risk. So in the milk, right, you have Listeria and Salmonella and E. coli, right, all kinds of stuff in raw milk. And that becomes concentrated in the cream. Right? So the person buying the cream needs to know that that risk exists. So what they would need to do under regulations for FSMA is inform that customer that this has not been treated, this is raw, you are responsible for controlling the microbial hazard at your facility. And you need to notify them that that is what is taking place. Do you agree?
Yeah, totally, absolutely. In Colombia, our regulation is the same.
Okay.
We cannot sell dairy products that is not pasteurized or made from pasteurized milk. So the cream is the same thing. You have to pasteurize the cream before selling. So actually in Colombia, we can transfer the cream, raw cream, to a customer. You have to pasteurize in your facility or in a facility to other industry, but you can sell to the market raw cream. It's prohibited.
Yes, and that's good, but you can. I wasn't quite sure. You can sell raw cream between companies, like in the U.S.
Between companies, it can be sold, but as you said, the receiving company has to know that the cream is raw, so they have to pasteurize it.
Okay, good. So hopefully, Cheryl, that answers your question. If you need more information, you can, of course, email us. We're happy to assist or put more comments in, and we'll see what we can do.
Maybe there is another example.
Please.
For example, hamburgers. A meat company can sell hamburgers that is in few words, it's a raw meat.
Yes.
So according to FSMA and other food safety standards, you have to communicate clearly to the customer how can he or she cook the hamburger in your home.
Yeah,
how
so
the temperature, how the time you have to turn upside down. I don't know if the word is correct.
Yeah, no, that's a good.
Both sides of the hamburger for some kind of time and temperature to kill bacteria in the hamburger.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a great example. So that would be an example of validation, right? So the company that is manufacturing the raw hamburger needs to have validated processes for time and temperature for cooking a hamburger to protect the consumer, and they need to tell the consumer about that.
Right.
And a process authority then is someone who can help to set those parameters.
Yeah, that's it.
Exactly. Okay.
The responsibility of the company is to communicate that information more precisely as they can.
Right. So this is interesting too, because I'm sure, Bernardo, that people on our call today, this is new, right? Process authority is something new to them. So even if you know what a process authority is in the United States, I think there is a view that it's a very limited use of process authorities. So as we mentioned, right, so canning, using autoclaves, things of this nature. Aseptic products. In the United States, you have low acid canned food regulations that need to be adhered to, which require process authorities and things like this. But really, a process authority can be used for many things, right? So as you are creating your food safety plan, and you need to understand for your sanitation, time and temperature and flow rate for cleaning, or you need to make sure that your time and temperature at your kill step are correct. A process authority can help with this, correct?
Yeah, of course. We can assume that sanitation process is a very common activities in the companies, but it's certainly that not all the microbes respond equally to concentration of sanitary substance or time exposure of that disinfectant. So the first time we have to know is the efficiency of the disinfectant to not only specific pathogens, but in general to the microbes that is in our plants.
Yes.
So it's convenient to ask the supplier of disinfectant to know the efficacy not only for pathogens but microorganisms that have collected for our plants.
Right.
Because sanitation is not only a food safety issue or preventive activity, so,
Yes.
but only for microbiological stability of the product.
Right. Well, and Bernardo, you make a good point. So part of understanding this is where a process authority can help, is not all microbes are the same. So for example, listeria, very easy to kill with heat, right? It doesn't like heat, right? Dead. If you have a product, so for example, if you're producing product with chocolate, so cocoa powder and things like this, cocoa powder tends to have lots of spores. Spores are very difficult to kill. So the process authority needs to know this. So when they design the process, they take that into account. Now, in these type of areas, right, you're talking food safety, as we're discussing, but also food quality, right? Because if you have a high microbial load in the product after you process it, that's going to impact shelf life, right? So process authorities can help with that too.
Yep.
So yeah, what's nice about, and this is something from my experience running quality, is that process authorities can be very, very helpful if you have regulatory issues. So if FDA comes into a facility and challenges your parameters for food safety, if you have a process authority who can help assist and explain, FDA respects that. They know that process authorities are, very high on the knowledge scale. And if you have a process authority who has looked at your process and you can share that with FDA is going to be much more receptive to that information.
I had an experience of that point. In the past, I worked with a spice company, we have a factory in Bogota and other in near to Medellin. And FDA announced that we have a visit from inspector, FDI inspector. But he is not only inspector; he was an investigator. So the high level of inspection was very interesting. And during the first hours of the visit, we show him our experience. And when he saw that I was process of authority in the past years, so he said, "Oh, wow, excellent! I am more comfortable with you
Good.
in the visit." So it was good.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's a good point, Bernardo, in that with a process authority and using this expertise can be expensive to do this, but if you have a very, very robust and documented process, it's going to save you difficulty in the future.
Yes.
Absolutely. So this is a unique opportunity for the Food Safety Chat in that we haven't had anyone on who is outside of the United States and working with clients who import into the United States. So I would really like to get your opinion on this. There's a lot of confusion with suppliers in other countries in that they think that the Food Safety Modernization Act means that they need to apply and petition to the FDA or the United States to become approved to ship product into the US, but that's not true, is it?
Mm-hmm.
How do you,
Yes.
I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
Yeah, some companies assume that FDA certified products, but it's not true.
Right.
FDA doesn't certify anything.
Right.
Maybe the confusion is with the private standards like GFSI, which is required for some clients that sell products to the market. In this case, the certification is a very useful tool to has a confidence with the supplier outside the US. So, but in terms of FISMA, the documentation and especially the I don't know the word, the solid framework or basis of hazard analysis of food safety plan is a key element to demonstrate not only the clients or the customers, but the inspectors from FDA that that the food safety plan is robust.
Yep, absolutely. So as an example, let's say I'm a US manufacturer and you are a Colombian manufacturer and I want to buy coffee beans, wonderful Colombian coffee beans from you. It is my responsibility as the purchaser of those under the foreign supplier verification to contact you and work with you and say, okay, Bernardo, I'm going to buy coffee beans from you and bring them into the US. I need to understand, to your point, your food safety and your food safety plan, and I am responsible for that. And when FDA comes to my facility, I need to be able to have the documentation that shows that you are a supplier that is producing safe coffee.
And as a purchaser, you have to approve me.
Yes.
Based on technical performance, based on the robustness of my food safety plan, based on risk-based or science-based. In terms of you have you documented the hazard analysis documented in risk-based criteria, and other verification activities after that, for example, or including uh, a visit, work, audit work in my facility, for example.
Ah, yes, absolutely. So what type of challenges and issues do you see with Colombian facilities that you work with who import to the US? What challenges do they have?
Well, the in general, Colombian or other Latin American companies that expect to export to US uh, are familiar with HACCP
Hmm.
system, but we know that there is a important difference from FISMA for preventing cultures regulation
Yes.
in terms of risk-based point of view when you have to do hazard analysis.
Hmm.
However, apart from the preventive culture itself, for example, sanitation,
Hmm.
uh, that is a preventive culture control,
Hmm.
high, has a high level from it has in the past.
Hmm.
So maybe there is uh, not enough understanding of that difference from hazard to preventing control regulation.
Yeah,
And
it is a bit confusing, right? Yeah.
in fact, validation is one of the different important difference that it's explicitly required in the regulation.
Yes. Yeah. And in the US, right, and this kind of comes back to what we were talking about earlier. A lot of times in the US, FDA will come in to inspect and they will present their food safety plan. And then FDA will say, okay, how do you know that this is effective? How did you validate this? And what information did you use to reach that decision? And companies go, right? A lot of companies get in trouble because of that. They don't have the documentation showing why that is effective, right? And so there's different sources you can get for that. So, for example, your sanitation process, if you're a company using a chemical supplying company, so like in the US, Ecolab or other companies like this, their
Mhm.
processes are validated, right? They know, to your point, Bernardo, the efficacy of the sanitizer. They know the contact time. They know the usage concentrations. They know the dwell time associated with rinsing and these type of things. And you need to use those. And this is where, too, back to our point earlier, where a process authority can be very helpful as well. You need to show proof, right?
As we told before about some technical parameters for heat treatments,
Yes.
in the sanitation based on CIP cleaning, for example, the process authority have to know and understand the engineering issues uh, uh, of CIP systems. For example, the flow rate, it's one of them,
Hmm.
because the detergents and the disinfectants have to in contact with the contact surfaces for certain time,
Hmm.
and the flow rate is important for the turbulence and the mechanical action of sanitation.
Mm.
And
Yes.
we can assume that simple circuit of tubes, it's a very simple problem, but when you have um, instrumentations, equipments in the circuit, for example, tanks, storage tank, for example, the flow rate change.
Ah.
So you have to consider a hydraulic balance uh, after and before and after the tank, in order to maintain the flow rate, the correct flow rate. So the power of the pump, the power of the pump, the supplier pump, is little different from the returning pump in the circuit. You have to know and determine a precise balance, hydraulic balance, to maintain the flow rate correct.
That's a very good point. So let me see if I can summarize, and then you can tell me if I'm correct. So for example, in a facility for sanitation, you have two different types of cleaning. You have clean out of place, where you take things apart and you hand clean. And then you have clean in place, CIP, and that's what we're talking about. So you have a system, and you have a tank with chemicals and these type of things, and hot water and what have you, and it will go through that circuit to clean. And to your point, that system needs to be balanced. So your flow rate going in needs to be different than your flow rate going out. You have to have your temperature probes at the correct location. You have to have your pH probes and your dissolved solids probes and these type of measurements at the correct places within that system. And that equipment needs to be validated for that usage. So for example, pumps can vary greatly if you change the impellers. And if you have new impellers and maintenance goes in and changes to a different style of impeller, that can radically change the system and it won't clean correctly, right? So validation and using of a process authority for these type of functions and figuring this out through your plant is critical. Do you agree?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, good. One other quick question on foreign supplier verification, because here in the US, this is a source of frustration. So I'm curious for your opinion. Is going back to our coffee example, very rarely, unless you're a big company, do you buy directly from a supplier. You're buying through a distributor or a broker or something of this nature who brings it in, right? So you have the coffee manufacturer in Colombia. The beans are loaded on a ship. They're purchased by a broker who brings them to Miami, who then sells them to a distributor, who then sends them to me, right? So the supply chain can get very confusing, because I need, as the food safety expert at the facility, under foreign supplier verification, I need to understand you, right? Not the distributor and not the broker, the manufacturer. So from your perspective, Bernardo, how do you help companies get that information through that complex chain so that I get that information?
Okay, relating to documentation, it's clear that local manufacturer, for example, in Colombia, has a food safety plan complete. But if you think in another example, apart from coffee, for example, dairy, or for example, any meat product, poultry, for example, the supply chain is important to maintain the cold temperatures for storage and transportation. In that case, it's important to know how the logistics impact the conservation of freeze or refrigerated conditions.
Yes.
And the responsibility of broker or distributor is to know that information and perform a hazard analysis of that steps of logistics.
Yes, absolutely. And no, that makes sense. And so in the US, sometimes the communication along that process is hard. It's hard to get information. So I think this is a good example, Bernardo, of having contacts in the location you're purchasing from can be very helpful, right? So as a consultant, I could reach out to you and say, hey, Bernardo, I need some help understanding my supply chain and making sure that everything is kept okay for food safety until it reaches me. So that's a good value there.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yes.
Very good. So we're getting ready to kind of close out here now. We'll bring that kind of the conversation back up to summary, to 30,000 foot level. So a process authority is an expert, a highly regarded expert in food manufacturing, who can be used to help you make sure that your process from a food safety standpoint is robust. There are legal areas where you have to do this in the United States. So under low acid canned foods and other regulations, a process authority must evaluate and approve your process. But we've also, as we've talked about today, Bernardo, using a process authority for other applications where it's optional is extremely valuable, right? You can use it to set up the parameters. You can use it as part of your food safety plan, and you can use it as the justification for FDA when they ask, how do you know these parameters work? Well, the process authority has documented and shown that these things work, and they give you that information so that you have that. So that's extremely valuable. The other key point, I think, especially relative to expertise such as you, is that having experts in locations that are supplying your facility who can assist and make sure things are being done as you think is very valuable as well. So is that a good summary, or how did I do?
Excellent. Excellent.
I'm sorry, please go ahead.
No, it's an excellent resume, because we can think that those two issues is nothing to do with each other, but is completely related to.
Yes, very good point. Very good point. They are completely related. So if you're new to the concept of a process authority, definitely research that and learn more about that, because it can be very, very helpful for your food safety. And definitely when you're dealing with suppliers, and in the US, we have lots of issues with foreign supplier verification, Bernardo, and companies that are being written up by FDA and getting 483 violations because they don't understand their foreign supply chain. So experts such as Bernardo can help with those activities. And having someone who is in country, or having someone who is familiar with the regulations and speaks the language and knows all of the individuals involved, can be extremely, extremely valuable. So definitely reach out to Bernardo if you're in that area. In the United States, we buy lots and lots of things from Central and South America. So they're always coming in, and I'm sure Bernardo's assistance would be very helpful. His email and how you can contact him is on the screen, as well as mine. So please reach out. We're always very happy to help. So in closing, right, very good conversation, right? This is a concept, Bernardo, that I think people need to know more about. So I'm very pleased to have you today. So thank you very much. Very glad to have you as a guest. And everyone, yeah, so we will be back here next Friday. So the same time, and wow, September already. Summer is going away. So next Friday, September 3rd at 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. East Coast Time, 9 a.m. Colombia Time. We will, again, have a new topic and a conversation. And again, if you would like me to talk about a particular food safety topic, or there's an expert that you would like me to discuss those with, I'm very happy to do that, right? This is your show. And the more information we can supply for food safety, the better we all are, because food safety involves us all, and it's not a point of competition. So the more we can help and teach each other, the better we are. So everybody, thank you again for joining us. And Bernardo, thank you, sir. It was very, very good conversation.
Thank you very much, Brian. Have a good day.
Yep. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.